Well, hello, happy today, happy every day. This is a video entitled Dissertation Dramedy. By me, Dr. FEP, Ph.D., who is a human professor. So, as a creative and critical thinker, I have a knack for finding gap. Now you can too. I'm going to demonstrate an example of a research study that can be done and how I came across finding the gap, and then talk a little bit more about dissertation dramedy, the journey to completing a dissertation. It can play out like a dramedy, which is an experience that combines elements of drama and comedy. So anybody who's embarking on writing a research, it's what to write about. It's drama. You got to laugh about the ideas in the process, because you might start off with ideas that want to save the world. They're huge, but you're not going to be able to get them done. It's not doable in a time frame like within the year or a few months or 5 years or even 10 years. You don't want to spend 10 years writing your dissertation. You want to get that thing done. It's a paper, make it doable, get it done, get the degree, move on with your life, do more research, go on. So that's comedy, is where you have to laugh about the ideas in the process. So laugh about ideas in the process, their doability. The problem statement, drama, because you're stating a problem, but it's not even really a problem. It's like what you're going to research, right? But it's called the problem statement officially in the document. So be lighthearted, laugh, and make each challenge or milestone fun or funny. It's hard. It's hard to make challenges fun or funny, because you maybe have worked on your paper 100 hours and it's going through your chair and your committee, and there's these changes to make and those changes to make and this and it. It's like you're like taking punches, but the process of hoop jumping is part of the process. So just laugh. You're jumping through hoops. Make it fun or funny. If you don't cry and laugh in the process of writing a dissertation or a huge research project, seek help. You are not human. If you're an experienced researcher, you might not cry as much, but at the beginning, when you're writing your first huge research project, you're probably going to cry a little. And that's where I say you're probably not human if you don't cry and laugh. But that's a joke. So moving on. Saving the world. Now, I say this to all this dissertation students, candidates, you're not going to do it. You're going to do what's doable, because you want to graduate and be done, right? Do you want to keep paying tuition? No. So breaking news, the world is saved by the scientific discovery. Not really. Some area in the world may be advanced, but the whole world is not going to be saved by any one scientific discovery or whatever you write in your dissertation. Your dissertation is going to contribute a little itty bitty speck in the body of knowledge. Just a little blip. Just a contribution to the body of knowledge. Something that hasn't been studied that you're studying, and you're filling a gap. So it's okay to think and start big. It's totally okay. Think and start big. Review the literature, which means everything that's already been said to be written about the subject matter. Now, because we're in 2023, March 2023, there's a few little hacks you can take to this, but you cannot trust any one tool. You cannot trust any one person. You cannot trust any one resource. Like in critical thinking, you want to research everything on the subject matter. You want to check the credibility of the sources, have multiple sources, look at the things that are opposite of what you think you're going to see, like where you're thinking that this theory exists or this exists, but look at it, the people talking about this not existing. And then be humble. You don't know what you don't know. And then I think that was it. But just have maybe 5 ideas or 5 studies you can do that you can do. So you have a subject, and in the subject area, you have to find a framework, a theoretical framework. You're gonna have to have some research design. You do want to base on some theory or theories or ideas, because that goes in your dissertation. So it's important to have something to work off of. In order to do this example and show something that's not saving the world, but something that's like huge and doable, but over 10 years versus something that's doable within a year. I'm going to show some videos. So this video, this is just an example if I wanted to study bystander effect. So I have to show you what it is, because me telling you what it is, you know, not as impactful as me showing you, right? So here we go.
Like this street in New York City. If you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all
these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill. How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help. Help me, sir. Please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is 2 conflicting rules. One is the rule we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help, and it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You alright? You alright?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up?
She don't look well, does she?
You alright, yeah? What's wrong?
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm alright.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
While you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past. So I'd just like to check that he was okay. And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
Plays like this street in New York.
So that video, you can draw some conclusions. That one was, okay, he's part of the right group, so maybe that's why people were helping him, because he was wearing a suit and there were other people in suits over there, and it kind of, that's one like idea that's kind of studied. Then there's individualist cultures and collectivist cultures. Sometimes the individualist cultures are less likely to help and a collectivist culture would help. So it seems to be more people will help when you're the same, you're considered like in the same culture. So then this idea came to me this past week, speaking to students who are from a collectivist culture that says it's in their culture that they absolutely must stop and help. And if there's 3 people who stop, then you can keep going. But if something happens, you must stop and help. It's like their law in their country. So here, there's more reasons to why people don't stop and help, right? And actually, we've seen this recently where people, instead of helping somebody where it's we don't know if it's clear that something is happening or the person needs help, but people like pick up their phones and start recording things instead of actually helping somebody. And then more people will pick up their phones and start recording things. It's a little bit sad to me that people would do that instead of actually help when it's clear that there's something going on, that's a fight or somebody needs help, right? This other video discusses some of the research in the subject matter, and it's summarized pretty well.
If you've ever taken a psychology class, you've probably heard the shocking story of Kitty Genovese. As the story goes, she was murdered one night in 1964 with 38 witnesses, yet no one helped or even called the police until it was too late. Reports about this horrible, bizarre event sparked research on what came to be known as the bystander effect. Despite what you'd think, it says that sometimes someone is actually less likely to help if there are others around. But even though it's talked about in every intro psych course, the bystander effect isn't as simple as more people equals worse odds of getting help. Sometimes more is better, and there are other factors that matter too. Oh, and also, that original story of Kitty's murder isn't entirely true. After the New York Times published their story about Kitty Genovese, scientists set to work trying to figure out why so many witnesses hadn't responded. The first major study was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 1968. In it, 2 researchers created a similar situation in the lab. They had 72 undergrads come into what they thought was a study on common problems in students' lives. Each participant was seated alone in a room with an intercom to share their problems with 1, 2, or 5 other so-called participants, although they were actually recordings. Then, one of these pre-recorded participants pretended to have a seizure, and the scientists timed how long it took for the undergrad to get help. They found that the more bystanders there were, the longer it took, if they got help at all. When they were alone, 85% of participants got assistance. But in the largest group of 5 bystanders, only 31% did. Admittedly, most people were concerned about the sick person, but they didn't know if they should do something, and so the bystander effect was born. Since then, multiple studies have confirmed this effect, but they've also found it isn't always as straightforward as it seems. Sometimes people are more likely to help with bystanders, or simply aren't affected by their presence. One major influence on this is the bystanders themselves. Not surprisingly, people who are in a hurry are typically less likely to stop and help someone. And people who are highly skilled in a certain emergency, like nurses trained to handle medical situations, are also more likely to try to help, whether bystanders are there or not. More interestingly, though, making a commitment also matters. In a 2015 study in France, a man sat down his bag and asked either one specific person to watch it, everyone in general to watch it, or said nothing, then headed to a nearby ATM. Then, the researchers faked the backpack getting stolen. They repeated trials of this until they had a total of 150 different bystanders, 50 for each scenario. Ultimately, the more direct the commitment, the more likely people were to intervene when someone took the bag. Other studies suggest that responses in situations like this have to do with a couple of things. One is social influence. In general, when you aren't sure what's going on, you probably tend to look at other people for more information. And if no one else seems to be concerned, then maybe this guy's backpack isn't a big deal. So you don't do anything, just like everyone else. Another factor is diffusion of responsibility. If something happens when you're in a big group, like some participants in this backpack study, it isn't up to only you to help. Other people could help too. So you don't feel as responsible and don't act, and suddenly that man's out of a bag. Besides the bystanders, another major factor in general is the specific situation. Sometimes it's hard to tell if someone needs help or not. And many studies have found that when things are ambiguous, people are less likely to jump in, which seems reasonable. After all, if it turns out someone is just playing around, it could be really embarrassing to be wrong. Research suggests that ambiguous situations can make people fear being judged negatively, which can stop them from acting. The good news is that when it's clear that there's an emergency, the bystander effect doesn't usually happen. A 2011 meta-analysis of more than 50 studies also showed that if the situation is dangerous, like if the perpetrator is still there, people are more likely to help if there are bystanders. And that makes sense. Those situations are clearly an emergency, and it's safer if other people have your back. Ultimately, although there are some trends, a lot of different social and psychological factors determine whether or not someone will offer help. Today, research suggests that your best bet in an emergency is to make it clear that you do need assistance, and to make individuals feel responsible for stepping in. Really, though, it isn't that surprising that this effect isn't totally straightforward. Humans aren't exactly clear-cut, so the bystander effect isn't either. Even the original Kitty Genevieve's story wasn't as black and white as the New York Times reported. The truth is, 38 people did not witness the murder. When Kitty was first attacked on the street, many may have briefly heard something, but only a handful of people saw anything happening in the dark. And even then, it was in the middle of the night, and it was hard to tell what was going on. In other words, it was ambiguous. One person scared the attacker away by yelling out the window, and injured, Kitty tried to get to her apartment. Then, unfortunately, in the building's entrance where people couldn't see or hear her very well, the attacker came back. Police were called, but didn't arrive until it was too late to save her. The newspaper article wasn't published until 2 weeks after the event, so there was time for details to get a little fuzzy. Thankfully, we have researchers studying this phenomenon to make sure that it's less likely to happen again. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Psych. If you'd like to dig deeper into some of the topics you might have covered in Psych 101, you can watch our episode about Maslow's hierarchy.
So then this was a decent summary of the bystander effect. Obviously, you go to the peer-reviewed journal articles and you look up what's the most recent research that's been done. So then I got to thinking this week, where could language impact? I started to formulate a design or a study design, right? And I did that. I worked on this deck few days ago. Like, let's say, I think I have the date on it. Nope, I don't. It was like, let's say March 13th to the 16th, because today I did some other survey of lit tests. So the subject area that I want to look at is cross-cultural bystander effect. We can use more research on the bystander effect. Framework, I have already studied sociology, psychology, and statistics. So sociology is also like the mob mentality, but the opposite of that, right? This is a social phenomenon where people want to do what the bigger group is doing. So they don't help somebody who needs help, but sometimes maybe they don't know that somebody needs help, right? So there's clearness. So this got me to thinking, well, if kids from a younger age were taught to ask for help and what they need if they were in a situation in a crowd like this to get help, is this something that we could be teaching kids so that they can grow up and ask for help in a situation? I did a cognitive bias series, and bystander effect was in my cognitive bias series, and that I maybe did it a few years ago. Then a few years later, I got attacked at an ATM. And nobody helped me, but maybe it wasn't clear that I was in danger, but I really was, because a guy threw his bike at me and we were fighting. And then the guy we didn't physically fight, but I circled him and looked him in the eye, like it was the stare down. And I went and I circled him, trying to get him away because my little daughter had run and she hid in the bushes. And I was circling him away from her. And then I did the math and I said, look, if I fight with this guy, I'm probably going to get hurt. Even if I kill him, then I kill him and it's sad. And I would still probably get hurt, or maybe he could kill me. But it's not going to be good for me to get into a physical confrontation. So fortunately, I stared him down enough for him to get on his bike and leave. And then I was kind of still full of adrenaline. I walked over and the people who were watching, there were store owners, there were people sitting at a restaurant, there were people outside the bank. Nobody did anything, right? And the guy went away and they're like, hey, did you know that guy? I was like, no, I didn't know that guy. I was like being attacked. And I didn't think to say to those people, in that circumstance, I didn't think to say, hey, can you call the police or something? Because I was just trying to keep myself and my daughter safe. So I couldn't even say, hey, I'm being attacked. Can you help me? Can you in the blue shirt help me? I didn't even have time to look. Like I knew there was people around, but in order for this to work, you have to like really point out an individual and ask for help, right? And then global stats, statistics on collectivist and individualist societies. So if I was in Greece, maybe somebody could have interjected because Greece is a collectivist society, but this ATM attack happened here in America and we're an individualist society. So I would work with those frameworks. Those would be in my survey of lit, and then it would be in the section where I discuss my theoretical framework. So in 2001, there was cross-cultural bystander effect research, but we could use more. In 2015, the girl mentioned in the video, there was some research done at an airport with a backpack. 1968, this is where a phenomenon occurred and we began to study it. Around 2012, 2013, we have diffusion of responsibility, which is a sociology and psychology related topics. So my lit review might consist of 5% sociology material, 10% psychology, 50% bystander, recent bystander. So 50% would be like recent bystander effect stuff, and then 35% cross-cultural. So what can I do? Can I study this through my employer? I work at Happy Every Day. It's a 501c3. If we were to propose this project, this research project, the members would have to vote. The members would have to vote. The board would have to approve it. I potentially could study this through my employer. If we, and the way I envision studying it first off is similar to that video that we watched. But the first guy, it was really unclear if he really needed help. But you think if he was bleeding, it would be different. Somebody might help a lot faster. So that's one thing I can study if I wanted to study that specific aspect. Like if that part of bystander effect where when it is clear how much does this bystander effect, like if the guy was bleeding, would people really be helping? Can I access the data from home? Can this study be conducted with data already collected? I want to say yes, but I can't access it from home because I'm not Penelope Garcia from Criminal Minds. If you think of all the surveillance data that we have globally, we can study this. It can be studied. We can look at it. We can look at situations where things have happened, and that would probably be the coolest way to study this. But I don't, and Penelope Garcia is a character in a show where she works for the FBI, and she, at her fingertips, has access to everything and all video surveillance that she could find. And then she has facial recognition, all kinds of great, cool things. But I'm not sure how I could find, other than that, I'm not sure how else there would be data already there. So can I talk about my interests and attract opportunity? Absolutely. So I'm talking to you about it right now. I can also search for research affiliates, like other people who might be interested in doing this. It could be somebody wanting to make a short movie, short video, somebody who likes making those videos like the one we saw before. It could be a news network. It could be, well, not really a news network. But I can look for research affiliates, right? My elevator pitch. So if I'm now this is where some of my dissertation students are at, because some of them come into the dissertation program and they work for an employer where they're getting their data and they found a gap in the research and they're going to write it. Some of them are doctoral business administration students. So, and their DBA has to match like helping an industry or company or corporation. How can bystander effect help industries, corporations? If I was to do this for a DBA, it would help with workplace relations, like with people helping people out at work inside the workplace, because we could potentially, put this study in that realm, because we do have a lot of trainings on how to be helpful and how to prevent workplace harassment and all this and that. And like, if we see harassment, helping it actually, I think this effect has been in workplace training videos that I've watched myself. So my elevator pitch would be something like, hello, my name is Efthemia, Effie for short. I'm a researcher, an author. So you got to say that I'm a researcher. I am a researcher, an author. Did you know that in America, in our American, and this is if I'm pitching to somebody in America, did you know that in our American individualist society, the bystander effect results in people letting a person suffer when people are in a group? So I had a conversation with students from a collectivist society halfway around the world, and they were surprised individualist cultures behave in that way. At the end of the dialogue, students mentioned that now, even though for the most part people will help people, sometimes they don't. Examples, like they won't let elderly in the car or go somewhere with somebody. So even at the end of that dialogue that I had with my students, who were mentioning how in their society they would help, some of them started to say, well, you know what? There was an instance when like an elderly person tried to get in somebody's car. And I said, well, in that case, you don't want to put somebody in your car and you don't really want to go somewhere with somebody. I've watched enough episodes where, people get duped into going somewhere with somebody and then the next scene is a serial killer. I mean, the likelihood of us being hurt by a serial killer is slim, but it's still like, just don't go somewhere with somebody. And then letting an elderly person in your car, they were saying in their culture that's been on the news that they're scams. So people, even in collectivist societies, I believe, are still trending to maybe not be as helpful. There's changes in our society. The first explanation of why people won't help in a group is because the rest of the group is not helping and won't help until at least one person begins to help. I might have used the word help a little too much there. My elevator pitch could be a little bit better, but I'm just get the gist or an idea. Another explanation is people do not want to get involved. I am researching how language, race, and socioeconomic status impact this social theory. So I'd like to see how language, race, and socioeconomic status impact the social theory. We saw in the first video how the socioeconomic status, the higher the status individual seemed, in that case, there's probably enough research that shows that people will help the higher status person, right? But then race, I would love to see how race or language can impact this, right? So ponder. I started to design. So I was thinking I want to do research on the language. And mind you, I did this deck earlier this week. And then what I'm going to show you a little bit later on what I did with ChatGPT, that came afterwards. So, like I said earlier in this presentation, do not trust one tool, do not trust one dissertation chair, do not trust one dissertation committee member, and be humble. You don't know what you don't know. So sometimes don't trust yourself. Just continue to keep researching. So research on language. Culture, individualist, collectivist, socioeconomic, level of wealth. So say I want to study these things, I want to look up research. Hypothesis, just an example, like thinking how strongly, what research question I strongly want to focus on. The same language, higher likelihood to help. I'm thinking that we have a role play. There are 2 same sex and then 2 opposite sex, and both groups have the same language as the location and then another language. So say we were in Greece, the people spoke Greek. Say we were in Greece and the people spoke a different language. It could be English. So if the people in Greece, would the people in Greece help the people speaking Greek more likely? Or would the people in Greece equally or not help the people fighting who speak English? So another hypothesis, the group will help if appear higher status. So how about no language is spoken, just both actors in business suits? And that's a fight, not just somebody laying on the ground. And then individualist, but some language other than main spoken in area. This can support why I didn't finish my sentence there. So this one, so for this hypothesis, I was thinking we could be in America and I'm in California, and say I go to an area that there's Hispanic, lots of like Spanish speaking, and it's Spanish speaking. And the studies conducted there, and I'm in America, but I'm in an area that's Spanish speaking. Would my 2 fighters speaking Spanish get more help than 2 fighters speaking Farsi, let's say? Because in the area that I'm in, those are different languages and they're prevalent here. Or we can do Chinese or something, right? So my timeline impacts, language, appearance, extraneous. So could it be, it could be a time of day, it could be rain, it could be, there could be reasons. If I'm video recording these scenarios, these fights, there could be reasons, and those would be my extraneous variables that might impact to this. So I just put this together, this little deck this week, just to pitch my bystander. I mean, this research that I would love to do. And mind you, I have like dozens and dozens of videos from another research project that I did. So the videos have already been recorded, but I haven't even gotten to the analysis part yet. And this research was started in, it was, I asked people driving across America and around America, but then nope, I think I even asked people internationally, what does love mean to you? And what does enlightenment mean to you? And I haven't even finished that research yet, but if I feel like doing this bystander effect, I just showed you how I'm thinking I would probably do it. So then I went to ChatGPT today, because yesterday I had a meeting about it, and I was surprised at some of the things I was hearing in the meeting. So I figured, you know, I'm gonna just embrace, as was recommended by a person leading the meeting, which is a provost at one of the largest business colleges in America. And I was like, all right. So I asked ChatGPT, and now mind you, I know I've had students, and I've noticed since 2017 that some students are using some kind of tool. So I know it's 2023 right now, but even in 2017, I was noticing some students were using some tool, because even though they weren't getting caught on Turnitin, they were using something was being used, because you know when the student sits in front of you and speaks to you, and then when they write you a paper, you have to be a total idiot if you know, and I could ask, did you have an editor? And if they say yes, okay. But if that's not the case, if they're like, no, I wrote it, then yeah, okay, I'm not really sure you wrote it. So this is ChatGPT today, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2023. I said, give me a summary of what has been written about bystander effect and diffusion of responsibility, including cross-cultural differences, and cite references in APA Style 7. So the fact that I asked it to cite my references, we'll get to that later when we look at my Turnitin scores, but generally, this is just, hey, giving me what's out there. I also wanted to say, hey, tell me any and everything that has been written about bystander effect that is academic. I could also ask that, and then I would have all the research right in front of me, right? So that's a little bit of a shortcut. It's kind of like when we used to go to the library and we used to have to open this little tiny drawer, and we used to have to look at an index card and then kind of like figure out where that book was. But then we had the fingertips of being able to control F something. And now this is like the next level where, hey, go ahead, do this. Just say, give me and just use it, but don't let it use you. I have to admit also that in the past 10 years, I am not impressed with the quality of dissertations that are coming out. I wrote mine wholeheartedly myself, wrote it. Did I have an editor? I did. I did pay somebody to help edit. I speak English well, and I still had an extra editor go over my paper that I paid extra. The writing center at the university helped me so as well. So first the writing center, then I had an extra editor, and then I had 3 people double check my statistics. So I had already done the analysis and the stat stuff, and then I had 3 people double check it because the results that I got in my dissertation were not favorable to the organization that provided me the data, who hoped or wanted to have their tool or their, it's okay. It still worked. The tool still worked, and it was still a good tool. But bottom line was, to predict future behavior, it's better to see a person in person. Bottom line. So I asked ChatGPT, it gave me a good little summary here. I then had the references, right? So this first clump, I decided to put as a post on one of the LMSs. And I put it as a post on one of the LMSs, just that first part. And I was happy to see that it came back with 25% similarity score because of the citations, because I asked for citations, right? But then again, I don't know. It's because it wasn't paraphrasing good enough, but it's something to like look at better at. I would say use this to help you, but you still need to write your own. You still have to write it in your own words. You could read it and synthesize. Do not submit things that are written by somebody else. I did this, like I said, as an experiment here. So I have seen writing that in another LMS where the student admitted this whole part was written by the AI, and there was 0 similarity score on that, right? So that's the difference between, I guess, asking with the prompt, give me APA citations versus not. But I could probably try this again next week or whenever. So this is just the forum post. So I posted this in a forum, and it got 25% similarity score. So then I was like, I want to post all the research that all the regenerate, because on ChatGPT you could say, hey, give me more, right? So then I went to give me more, and it gave me more, and I went to give me more, and it gave me more, and I went to give me more, and it gave me more. And then I think this is where I was like knowing that I have something to study. So I asked, oh, I didn't save my prompt. It was the second to last one. Oh my God, don't even tell me it didn't even save it. Oh, and I closed out my computer too. Okay, no, it's here. Never mind. Okay. So then I didn't ask for any APA. And when we go look at the paper in the other LMS, we'll check if the end here, you know, on page 5, if we start to have similarities. So I wanted to ask, has anyone studied the impacts of language on bystander effect? Because that's kind of what I was thinking to study, right? And then ChatGPT said, I'm not aware of any studies that specifically investigate the impacts of language on the bystander effect. However, it is possible that language could indirectly affect the bystander effect through its influence on cultural norms and socialization, for example, in collectivist cultures. And we've already know this, right? We already know this. So that's why I had already designed my study. Collectivist cultures where groups harmony is emphasized. So furthermore, language barriers could also play a role in the bystander effect. Language barriers, meaning you don't know if the people are fighting, but sometimes it's obvious people are fighting. You don't have to know the language they're speaking, right? This could be particularly relevant in multicultural and multilingual societies where individuals may not share a common language. And that's why I said in my study, I'd like to go here in California, go to a Spanish speaking location, have Spanish speakers fighting, and then have non-Spanish speakers fighting, see what happens. It would also be interesting, you know, to have females fighting or male-female fighting, just that also too. Because you see how excited I can get. So I know how excited you can get about what you want to research, right? If you really want to research something. So while there is not yet any research specifically exploring the impact of language on the bystander effect, it is interesting avenue for future investigation. So thanks, you know, our ChatGPT AI for letting me know that, you know, it's good. Such studies could shed light on the ways in which language and culture interact to influence pro-social behavior in a group context. You know how when you meet somebody, if you do speak another language and you're out and you do hear somebody speaking that other language, like if us here in America, if I hear somebody speaking Greek, I might speak Greek to them because there's not that many Greeks here. But over here, if you hear somebody speaking Spanish, you may or may not be likely to speak to them depending on where you are, because a lot of people do speak Spanish here. So then again, I regenerated a response. While there has been extensive research on the bystander effect and diffusion of responsibility, there's limited research on the impact of language on these phenomena. However, some studies, so just the point that I'm trying to make is if the person is more likely to make the people around, make them feel, if the people who are fighting are more like the group watching, like speaking the same language, maybe that can help. And then that'll also support the collectivist culture. So this is not related. This is, well, this is, I could actually look at this 2009 study as well. And I could look this up in the peer review. So at least I used this tool to find some things to fish for, right? I got links, I have stuff, and then I could pull this up and read and learn more. So fun times, right? Now, I did mention that I am human and I am, my name
Happy
is,
today,
my name
happy
is
every day.
Efthemia Papadopoulos,
Happy
right?
today, happy every day.
How do you stop this video?
It is challenging to be happy.
So while it is here, there we go.
Challenging to be happy every day, but in our waking hours every day. Happy today, happy every day. It is challenging to be happy every day, but in our waking hours every day, we as humans can become present and aware and feel peace when we train ourselves to do it at least once every hour and more often. Our intentions and affirmations though need to be set on autopilot so that our actions every day lead us to feeling joy, happy, great. Share happy today, happy every day and be part of the movement.
Now, am I really human and your professor? I don't know. Moving on. So then I put that whole paper in this LMS. And oh no, hold on, let me make sure it's sharing the right. All right, we might as well just share the screen so we don't get lost. Oh, I timed out, didn't it? Oh gosh. Okay, well, this is where we were going to check. Now, 49%, I know that 20 something percent of this 49% is because this first top part was submitted. Oh, perfect. So here we go. Here, like I said, so 49%, so submitted to Westcliff. That's where I uploaded it in that LMS on a discussion post. So it caught it. It was just like a few hours later that I submitted this whole paper in this other LMS. It's because submitted papers were paying of their authors, instructors, and respective institutions, we're unable to show you the content of this paper this time. And if you would still, please click on and submit a permission request. I know it was me, so I'm not doing anything about that. Then I'm gonna scroll down. And then, so here I regenerated a response and the AI didn't even paraphrase good enough. Actually, here are the citations, right? So here's some parentheses, and then it says it came from Latine and Nita, so number 7. So I would go to number 7 and see if that's the case. Ada University. I mean, I can scroll down to Latine and Nita, psychological bulletin. So I don't even know if that came from that university. I would have to click on it. Let's see if I can click on it. Oh, darn, yeah. Okay, so here we go. I mean, the bystander division, diffusion of responsibility. Can't tell, but I mean, I'm onto something. I know I'm onto something. So let's go back here to 40. So like I said, I've seen things that I asked, well, look at here. This is number 11 is also pretty green. Not, it's the color is green, but number 11 is, it's 1%. That's 1% similarity, right? So all these 1% aren't really going to add up too bad. They're not going to be too impactful. All these small ones. I'm saying, you know, still use this for your own like little boost for critical thinking if you must. But do not trust any one source or thing, right? And then the doability of the project, right? Am I going to study? I actually would prefer to study it through recording footage that has already been recorded in the mass surveillance of the society in this, you know, the times that we're in. And so I can understand when students say to me, hey, Dr. P, I want to like collect my own data, right? Because like in this study that I'm so passionate about, I want to go and make those scenarios. I want to make it, create that, even though the data is out there. So it's just a matter of, but I've been a researcher for a very long time. And then I also am somebody who works. And then I'm also like somebody who has to prioritize what project to work on. So I might have chosen to work on music, video game, and film projects outside of, you know, me doing research. But you are going to work on this project. If you're already at an employer that is going to have data for you to use, I suggest going with that so that you could finish and get the heck out of school, be done with your dissertation, and then work on make it your life career. I mean, I don't know. Some people are committed to this like things in life, and then some people end up not being committed. Me, I was always interested in social psychology since undergraduate. So in undergraduate school, I was outside of the post office and I had a clipboard, and I was watching people come out of the post office of this location in this little town that was next to the state police office. Like there was a state police barracks, or the state police were also in this small town, and it was like within the mile radius. So I was watching people come out of the post office and I would check off whether they put on their seatbelts, like how often they did. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I was just like, and this was undergraduate little baby research, right? It was like, and then my conclusion was, hey, people are likely putting on their seatbelts because see the state police often and they're right there. If I was at a post office somewhere else, maybe some of the people I observed wouldn't put their seatbelt on, right? So then of course I did the other study, which is, I can find it, where I haven't analyzed the data yet. But I will. Actually, somebody else can do it. But it doesn't even need to be scientific, or I don't even really need to do anything academic. Real people, real talk. I mean, the purpose of this series could just be that people are, oh, I've been copied since. Okay. Let's see what we got here. So.
Hey, happy today, happy every day.
There is an entire real people, real talk. And I think last time I looked, I think there was like 36 people, 36 interviews. And so I was thinking about this today, earlier. It was also people who were comfortable getting on camera with me, because while I was doing this, there were plenty of people who didn't want to talk. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want to be on camera. So that's also, and then obviously, okay, this series is not all the enlightenment and love talk, because I think it's about here. So about 4 years ago is when so from 4 years ago and earlier. Okay, so even this one 5 years ago. So this one is, I remember who I posed the question to. So it would be like, what does love mean to you? What does enlightenment mean to you? And then I was thinking, I do have a pretty diverse group of people talking about this, right? I have a pretty diverse group. And these guys were funny. They're like big burly guys that they work with big concerts, right? And they were scary looking. And I remember we were somewhere in the middle of America, and I said to them, they can come and like sit in the car and just check it out. And then they thought that I was going to kidnap them and bring them to space. And meanwhile, they look like the types of guys that would like kidnap me. It was kind of weird, because there's little old me, right? And they're like, we thought you were going to kidnap us and bring us to space. I was like, cool, fun. So yeah, these interviews, Wichita, Kansas, Alaska. So there is a pretty diverse group. So it would be cute to analyze this. And, this is a little girl. And then there's some other interviews. Oh, I have drag queen on here that answered the question. And then I have one of my yoga instructors who is very much speaks and talks about meditation and stuff. And then rest in peace, Dr. Chilapati. We were talking about other things with Dr. Chilapati. And then I think this other video, this is a lady who is dressed as Belle, I think. Yep. So, I mean, I have, if I want to just analyze the enlightenment and love part, I could have a research study right there. So what your life's work ends up being, I don't know. You don't know. I mean, you know, I just know that I like talking to people and I like researching, and I really enjoyed doing that clipboard, you know, social psychology study in undergraduate. But to finish my master's thesis and to finish my dissertation, I used what was doable, right? And I had said this to a class before, do that elevator pitch. I was waitressing at a restaurant, and I was just talking to people about my degree in statistics, and they just happened to have data on a web crawler in the year 2000. So, and this is when the internet wasn't as big as it was. So for my research and for my master's degree, it was a web crawler that spidered the internet. Well, spidered the internet. It was a spider, a crawler, whatever they're called. It went and collected all the messages from the internet financial message boards, and it used AI, artificial intelligence, from back in 1999 and 2000. It used AI to categorize the messages as bullish, bearish, or neutral. And then I use that to research how the internet financial message boards can predict the behavior of the stock market. So thinking that that was cool, I actually asked ChatGPT about that as well. And since my research, there's been dozens more of studies, but you need to get your elevator pitch going. And my PhD, I was at a conference for SIOP, Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology. And that's how I met the women who had this, they were organizational psychologists, and they had this tool, and I jumped on board to help with the reliability, validity of the tool. And it was fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved doing it, and it was painful, and I did cry, and I did laugh, but it got done, and it got done very well. And you want to do something very well, but also you want to do something that can be done. So prepare your elevator pitches now, whether it's to find the, access to data for your project, or whether you're doing it at your company and you're expecting to get a raise or promotion after you're done with this research. So yes, life does change after you earn a doctoral degree or a PhD. The way you write your resume and the types of jobs you apply for all changes. So be prepared for that. And let me know if you have questions. Just send an email. If you're one of my current students, send me an email on the whatever university. And then if you are one of the Happy Everyday members, my contact information is on the podcast season 3, Dr. P Happy Everyday podcast. So Happy Everyday by Dr. P podcast. Thanks.